Le quiero dar la bienvenida a Harri Hursti de Finlandia. Para aquellos que no lo conozcan, es la primera persona que encontró fallas en una máquina de votación, una D-Ball óptica. Una de las grandes razones de esta charla, o por lo menos en lo personal que yo encuentro importante, es que nosotros, como gente que nos gusta mucho la tecnología, también nos genera mucha desconfianza, y cuando esta tecnología es parte de un proceso democrático, Harri nos va a contar un poco cuáles son los problemas de soluciones propietarias o soluciones cerradas, y que es también parte de nuestro deber cívico ser parte y empujar a las empresas a que hagan sistemas abiertos, porque nos pueden afectar a todos. Así que les pido un gran aplauso a Harri.
Thank you. First of all, English is my third language, so I'm sorry about my horrible accent. The other thing is, this is Turbo Talk, so I'm going to talk a lot. The slides are not, I'm going to not tell about the slides, so read the slides. They are kind of independent from the presentation. The name of the presentation is "The Governments Can Be Changed by Bullets and Ballots." That's kind of telling that what is the alternative to democracy. My day job has nothing to do with elections or voting. My day job, I'm Chief Technology Officer of Safely Locked. We are developing end-to-end encryption, ultra-secure, zero-knowledge system. Think about an encrypted Dropbox. So if you are interested about that kind of encryption technology, I'm happy to talk about that. That's my day job. This is my kind of hobby since 2005. The interesting thing about democratic process is that it is not a question of if I want to be insecure myself. That's not a justifiable cause, because if I'm making my vote to be insecure and my vote gets rigged, it means that your vote is equally disfranchised, because it's a collective process. It's nothing to do with the individual votes, or it's all about the collective process. So that's why either everyone is safe and secure, or nobody is safe and secure. There is no alternative in that. So, who I am, as I say, day job, I'm a co-founder of EUNet. Years back when I sold it, have done a lot of security work, a lot of hacking, but I'm a mainly internet and telecom guy. So why the hell we are here talking about how we started using around the world insecure software in elections, which is the most fundamental process in democratic societies. This man and this picture became the icon of year 2000 Florida recount, when they were trying to figure out if that Chad in a punch card is pregnant, or if it's hanging, or if it's really punch. So people were thinking, okay, punch card's bad idea. Maybe we will go software, because software is reliable, easy, and simple, right? We can save a lot of trouble. So everybody jumped immediately and as quickly as possible to start to use software without really thinking about it. The other thing which is interesting to understand is that actually secret ballot came to the United States fairly late. So still in 1800, voting was done with the paper ballots openly, so everybody saw how each other voted. And of course, if you voted wrong, you got punched and your shop windows got broken. So the decision was, let's get rid of the paper, because the paper is the bad thing. So what was the first actual kind of electronic machine that was not electronic at all is 1920s. A very common voting mechanism was a lever machine. You press the button, you pull the lever, it's a completely mechanical calculator, no ballot. Nobody needs to be beaten up because making wrong choices, right? Well, it didn't happen that way, because in Pennsylvania they immediately invented a new thing called shoe police attack. So before you went to voting booth, you had to show your fingers, you cannot have gloves, you cannot have hand sneaker, and they had put a shoe polish to all the undesirable candidates. So if you try to vote with the wrong person, we came back, you show, oh, black, sorry, wrong choice. So the paper revolution against the paper ballot didn't work that well. So let's think about what we actually think electronic voting should be. You should be just taking one vote, add it to the candidate, print the total. How it could be more problematic. However, these are the actual two vendors. These are the semantics of two most used systems in the United States, the ESNS and Hard Pacific, if I don't recall. So this is what you actually got. So who was the guy who said the simplicity is the friend of security and the other way around? Whatever. So again, since we got that, we have a problem. Well, election is also very unique because you have to get it right the first time. I have a slide later we talk about the actual problems in that area, but you first of all, it's a national security asset. It's equal to military secret because this is the way you decide who are your leaders. Also, elections are getting closer and closer. You have a more heated, close context. So you actually have to be the 6 nines accurate. And you have to protect everyone, because if you don't protect everyone, coercion steps in. And again, a lot of people are not exactly that smart. You have still illiterate people, you have disabled people. This system has to be accessible to everyone and easy to use, easy to understand. Because if you don't trust it, you're not going to vote. I mean, here you have a mandatory voting, but the trust to the system is the key. However, you cannot trust the voters. So you cannot trust the poll workers. You cannot trust anyone around the system. The system has to be standing alone under any circumstances. And again, if people don't trust it, it's all for nothing. And also remember that the sore loser might say, oh, I contest this result. This was wrong. I won. So again, you have to be, or it was hacked when it wasn't. So you have to be able to prove that the result is right when a claim of false foul play has been presented. So what looks good? It has to be so simple and intuitive that everybody can use it. We are very error prone. So people actually do, select 3 candidates, they select 4. Or select 3 candidates, they select 1. Or they want to select candidate 1 who doesn't exist. So the whole system has to be equally understandable for all voters with all socioeconomic background. They have to be understanding what they are doing. And again, you have to also think about another way. So we have had fraud, paper-based fraud for hundreds of years. Counterfeit paper notes, counterfeit stuffing the ballot boxes. We have always had fraud. So the question is to think about what is the right attack vector. What is the minimum size of conspirators you need to rig a precinct or rig a municipality or rig the whole federal election? You want to increase the minimum number of conspirators to a high enough number that it is unfeasible in the real world. Of course, the problem is when you go to electronic, it takes just to hack the computer, which is a bad idea. But this is the whole thing. You have to think about the attack vector of adding so many people that they cannot keep the secret, or at least they cannot agree who should be winning. So, and again, the title, early word often, is actually a kind of anecdote. It means fraud. It means I'm stuffing the box. Today I'm going to vote 3 times or 100. So you want to have the absolute lock that everybody can only send 1 ballot. You have to be able to record the people who have voted, count the votes, and you have to be able to do this without any trust. You don't trust the poll workers, you don't necessarily trust the government, because they also have their own political views. So you have to be able to establish a system where the trust is not needed in order for me to believe that my vote was counted as cast. Again, privacy is so important, because if I can prove how I voted, I can sell my vote. If I can be forced to prove how I voted, I can be beaten up if I don't elect as I have agreed. So the privacy goes both ways. Again, the problem with a lot of the internet voting type of scheme is when you're voting home, who is protecting you from this coercion? So in order to understand where we are, I already touched base why in the US they went to lever machines, and why a lot of these problems have been starting from the US environment. The US is not the only place where electronic voting problems have occurred. You probably have read the problems in Holland with the NIDAP. But I'm just explaining why US, because everybody has their own flavor of democracy. We talk about democracy, but we actually have vastly different processes. This is what American paper ballot looks like. And this actually is not even complex. It can be up to 12 pages, both sides. So you can have a multi-page ballot. But here we have the presidential race, we have a senator race, and down we go to the topics. This is from California. This is the actual San Mario County, California 2000. So this is a simple example, simple ballot, and yet this is how many things you have to choose in order to, in election, but it can be up to 12 pages. Also understanding that when you see the map in CNN after the voting, it's bright red and bright blue. That is not true. This map actually represents how close the election is. Higher the bar is, that is the population, and the color shows how dominantly it's either Republican or Democrat. So deep red means deep Republican, deep blue is Democrat, and you see here how big population centers tend to be more bluish, and how the whole balance is. This picture is presenting an election where it's like 49-50, which is a real election. So this tells how close the elections are. Even more so, if we think about how close the elections are, you don't need to make a big fraud in order to tilt the whole state or county. You actually can be very smart and just look for a few counties out of the focus, not in the big cities, rig those by 10-20%, which doesn't really cause a lot of shock, and all of a sudden you have won that state. Again, you can do this in multiple ways. You can flip votes, or you can just deny people to vote in an area. In America, you register to vote, and in a registration, you usually tell what is your party affiliation. So you have a pretty good idea from any single democratic area what is going to be the most probable outcome for a certain election. So you can also use a denial service attack. Actually, Professor Doug Jones wrote a paper about incompetent poll worker attack, which means that as an election manager, I'm taking all my 80-year-old ladies and associate those to be poll workers in a place where I don't want the people to be able to vote. As simple as that. You all of a sudden have long lines. People cannot vote during their lunch hour. Done. So this is also to show how narrow the margins are. These are the real results from 2000, 2004. So you see how many places the margin of victory in presidential race is under 5%. And then when you see the number, we are talking about 105 million to 122 million votes going into this system. This is why the Six Sigma is so important. You actually are in a situation where very low number of votes makes huge difference. Well, after 2000 scandal, what happened was the Help America Vote Act was passed. I don't remember what it was billion and something, which was immediately poured to the market to start electronic voting. Originally, there was a lot of independent studies, but very low quality. And the vendors said, no, the machines are working perfectly. So everybody was flagged as conspiracy theorists in this area. There were a few academic studies, Avi Rubin from Johns Hopkins University being one of them, but nobody gave them a real access to the machines. So always it was saying, oh, that machine was stolen, or it had wrong software, old software, whatnot. So you end up in a situation where nobody really got a hold of the situation. Then 2005, what happened was I was invited to Tallahassee, Florida, and I was given access to a voting machine. I hacked that and proved how you can change the outcome of the election without audit trail. And of course, my research was not believed either. But good thing happened, and the good thing which happened was Secretary of State California ordered University of Berkeley to verify my results. So 2006, University of California, a team led by David Jefferson and Professor David Jefferson from Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, and David Walkner, who is a computer scientist and security scientist at UC Berkeley, went through and they verified my findings. Well, interesting thing happened. They were given the source code, so when I had found one way of doing that, they found 14. So not only I walked out of that saying, yeah, you were right, but also we started to realize how problematic the whole thing is. This triggered a lot of things. The new Secretary of State California ordered top-to-bottom review of all systems used in California. There were a few systems which were exempt because they were used on one place. Secretary of State Ohio, Jennifer Brunner, ordered Everest study, which is the oldest systems used in Ohio. And this later study was done under the umbrella of Penn State University, so it was truly independent university study. I was part of that. I was asked to fly from Finland to help in that. All of a sudden, we started to get real data. And we started to understand why things were wrong. But the most important thing which we find is all the systems were basically backdoored. Whether you call it as a leftover debug code, whether you call it something else, they all had their own mechanisms. One vendor, their hardwired password, idiots. You sign with any username and idiots, and it creates a log entry as the legitimate user would have logged in. Of course, Diebold, notoriously, their PIN code was hardwired. You can have whatever you want, but also 1111 works. Diebold later actually announced that they have improved security by 50%, and that's right, because now it was 6 ones. You know, you cannot make these kind of things up. The reality is so crazy comparing to whatever we thought is possible. So 2006, 2008, a lot of studies happened. We started understanding a lot more what happens in the machines. Princeton University was commissioned by Supreme Court of New Jersey doing a study. In the University of Connecticut picked up my study and started continuing with the electronic paper scanners, which is my original hack. Also, a new standard was established that since these programs are proprietary code, and the original way of stopping the research was to you just ask for absurd NDAs, that was dropped. Standard NDA practice, which give you right to publish, yada, yada, yada. So all of a sudden, we started to have an environment where independent studies and verifications of the systems were possible. And the latest thing which I'm going to cover is Washington, D.C. Had an internet voting trial in 2010. And Professor Alex Haldeman, who used to be with Princeton, who is now with the University of Michigan, he led the team, and that internet voting system got hacked. So we are going to look a little bit of these things. Most important lesson is that before these studies, everybody believed that source code review is the key. If you get the source code review, you will find all the bad things. Wrong. So everything important which we have found has been below the certified software. It's bootloaders, it's something in the stack. There has been a remotely controlled keyboard features in a custom-made operating system. That's one example which is real. Also, memory card hack, manipulating the memory where the votes are stored directly, bypassing the whole system. So actually, we found out that the source code review is very nice. It speeds up the process. Source code is not necessary. And trying to trust source code alone is dead end. That is not going to give you any kind of guarantees that the system is actually safe and secure to be used. And this is, by the way, let the pictures talk, what is the result. This is the voter activation card from Diebold. It actually likes me vote a lot. We changed this. It used to be a Windows computer. We didn't like it. Changed it to run Linux. Here in the Civic, their own we put our own software in place. Every single system has been hacked. Every system given to a study has been hacked. That is not good record. So the most common thing what people always say, you cannot hack the memory card because it's sealed in, or there's a lock. And this is just, everybody in this room knows, but this is just to tell, this is the seal which they also use the same seal in airplanes to lock the alcohol cabinets for tax reasons. Well, you can go out, sideways pins in and just flip it. The funny thing about this picture is the normal thing what people say, oh, you cannot do it because everybody would see you opening the box. In the United States, voting machines are sent to schools and homes of poll workers even a week before the elections. So these machines are in the school corridors, in the churches, or in the garage of poll worker for a week. Opening the box, changing the memory card, putting it back in is 10 minutes. But you have 1 week opportunity. In certain jurisdictions, even 2 weeks. So getting access to these machines, physical access is not a problem. Again, we talk about DRE, so this is the direct recording election machine, which is the modern version of lever machine. Just to tell, in the older machines, it was a battery refresh SRAM. The new one is a PCMCI card. What happened was, I stuck huge amount of files to that, and it booted slower. Booted slower? Okay. Obviously, the bootloader is doing something what it shouldn't. So the guys have made a very simple mechanism. If it files a certain file name, it assumes to be an image, and it reflashes itself. Nothing as complicated as Kerry was talking about. You just need to have the image file on the card. And if it happens, that's the name of the file. It doesn't ask any question. It reflashes the bootloader, it reflashes the operating system, it reflashes the election software. You are done. This is how easy it is. It's not really needing much of skills. This particular machine, by the way, is still in use in elections. So a lot of these things, after we found what is wrong, nothing has been fixed. So, and we are talking, for example, this machine, this hack was done 2008. So it's not about a few months. Also, a lot of false claims are always made saying, oh, you cannot hack these machines because they are not connected to the network. Well, usually they are. But in case they are not, people don't tend to forget that viruses started with the old floppy disk copying parties. So actually, SneakerNet, the voters going from one machine to another using the same authorization card, that's your virus distribution. And we haven't demonstrated it's a real attack. Even funnier is that some of these machines have a memory card which is not connected by electric means. Instead of they are using a magnet and infrared. So again, Palm Pilot and external magnet, that works. And again, after you have hacked one machine, you can continue to next guys, the optical device to hack that, and again, you have the virus distribution inside of the polling place working. Pretty scary and really stupid. So, hacking internet voting system. This is from Washington, D.C. I actually did have an updated version because it's an open source software piece, so I had the GitHub link to this software. But first of all the experts said, don't. But the election, managers there say, well, yes. No, sounds like yes. Let's try. What could possibly go wrong if you trust SSL? So they decided anyway, they wanted to give something they can say that this is trustworthy, and that's why they announced that before the election before the machine is open and the system is open for the real election, they will allow a short window for hackers to peek. Of course, what happened was they're changing all the time the dates. So teams which were ready to go certain day, they said, well, we are postponing 2 weeks, yada, yada, yada. Eventually, when they allowed the hack to start, they gave 3-day warning. And this was, I think it was almost a month later than it should have been. So we were really close to election, but still, because a lot of work were done, there were a couple of teams, and especially Alex had kept certain that he has a team which is ready to go. What happened when the whole system started to be hacked? First of all, the system is Ruby on Rails, Apache, and MySQL. And the source code is now available. The source code was not available at the time, so they say it is open source, but the code is going to be published after the election. Okay. Anyway, Alex and his team found immediately simple, classic shell script injection. Done. So they were basically in 12 hours, in 48 hours, they had total control, not only the servers, but the facility, also the routers and their CCTV. And this was kind of cool, because you could see the people strolling and happily doing their work. And later, when they realized they had been hacked, they were like, oh, shit, they are watching us, don't they? But the other thing what happened to Alex was he found that he's not alone. He found a lot of people from foreign governments strolling about, because the facility was shared with other people than election people. So he actually ended up to be helping and trying to patch these things so that everything doesn't leak out. Again, this small injection caused a huge kind of consequences. They were able to steal all the votes. They were able to change all the ballots which already had been voted. They were able to associate the voter back to the ballot back to the name. Take all the encrypt the private key. Thank you. That's useful for the future reference. Also, they were able to find, because these were military voters, they were able to find information about the voters which had never been in a server. So a lot of stupidity. Well, they wanted to make certain that people are understanding they have been hacked. So in the end, it says, thank you for voting, and they made it to start playing that university's war song, a fighting song. So it should be pretty obvious now it's hacked. Right? Well, what happened was that it still took almost 2 days until an independent tester who had been hired by election supervisor said, oh, it works fine, but the music is so annoying. What music? Again, after that, it was fun to see the people running around in a camera. But it's mind-boggling that you make that obvious hack and you have independent pen testing company, and it takes 2 days to realize this song shouldn't be there. And the fallout was that the system was taken down. And instead of using that as an election system, it was used to be sending ballots, empty ballots for the voters. So technology had its place. It allowed people to vote faster and mail the ballots back. But they found out and they understood using this as a ballot return mechanism is not a good idea. And we don't have really technology to enable voting. And this should be very easy. I'm just going quickly, but the most important thing is that people are thinking online voting should be like bank. It's not. In bank, they know how much money you have. When you are paying to your friend Jose, your Jose sees that money comes from you, and the bank knows where it came. It's all without any kind of anonymity. In election, you have an anonymity. You have to be protected. And you have to get it right. In banking, if money goes to wrong account, you actually can correct it. If you find a fraud, you can correct the fraud. In elections, it's very hard because everything is supposed to be secret. So it's a false analogy always to think about banking as an alternative. The other thing is, if we can do banking safely, why can't we? We don't have safe banking. We have all the time fraud in online transaction and e-commerce. The only thing what we have chosen is that we have insurance policies which are covering our losses. And as long as the fraud is in an acceptable level, everybody's happy. Enough money is made, we can cover our losses. That, again, is not the case in internet voting or in electronic voting, because if the hacker deletes anonymous ballot, you're done. By the system, you have to be always protected. The voter has to be protected. And again, if $100 billion bank cannot make the online system, the banking system airtight, what is the chance for a voting system? Because there's actually not that much money in a voting system market as there is in a banking market. So I think that's it. If you have any questions, I have almost used my half an hour. I have 2 minutes and 15 seconds left.
Hi.
Hi.
I would like sorry, I have to English. ¿La puedo hacer en español y la traducen? ¿Se puede? ¿Cuál sería un sistema ideal para vos de votación?
So the question was, what would be the ideal voting system for you? For me personally, it's paper-based voting. The reason is we have had 150 years of fraud. We are very good in protecting the paper, and so we understand what fraud is done. The other thing is, when the voter's intent is captured by a pen or by the ink to the paper, we can always recount. In the event of a foul play, as long as we have guaranteed the chain of custody, we can always take a new bunch of people and say, let's count again. So for that reason, right now, I don't see any technology out there which can replace a paper in voting environment. Maybe in the future we will find a way, but as of today, no.
Here. Sorry. Here. What about a hybrid system and use the electronic part to make a provisional counting quick and use the paper for backup?
Well, it's again using. I'm aware there is 900,000 people who are voting in Argentina with a hybrid system where we have paper and RFID chip. There is mechanisms in the world where you're using barcodes, etc., etc. The biggest problem in that is the process. So when you say it's backup, is it really going to be used or not? I mean, if paper is capturing the vote and you have a legal obligation to check the paper, sure, then you can have mechanisms which are easing up the process. I personally, for example, believe that paper ballots counted those with a computer. Use an optical mark recognition software, use a scanner, and use a software to get the result. That's fine. You can use the computers, as long as you also go with a mandatory recount back to the paper, and you verify that the machine was doing its work done right. Usually you should be using 2 independent software which are trying to verify. If you use a single system, people are lazy, you will get fooled. And so again, in that hybrid systems, the most important thing is that you always verify from the paper, you always have the legal authority to go back to the paper, and you always mandatorily do a recount. You never take it, even when there's no contest. It's 70-30. You still go and check the result. And there's a Professor Phil Stark, who is statistician in UC Berkeley. He's developing mathematical methods to know how much you have to recount in order to know that you are confident that this is the right result. So minimize your work. I personally have been writing open source software which allows using digital images from scanner and do 100% recount. But you have to verify then that the images are the same as the paper. So you again have to go back to the paper to see are my image files right. So I think a hybrid, using computers or using technology, because humans are very poor in counting. We are doing mistakes all the time. We are sequential animals and error-prone. So we should use technology, but we have to use it in a responsible way and try to improve and not open new holes.
Yeah, I have another question. What do you think about using cryptographic systems in order to have the anonymity that you need, that you know that the votes are not being changed, and in order to properly count them, and in order to validate the voter, but in a way that we know that someone voted, but we don't know who he voted or what the vote on an issue was.
So you are talking about cryptographic mixed networks, which are doing the anonymizing. And there are a lot of good research done in that area. Ben Adida from Harvard University, he is developing a software called Helios, which is an it's an electronic voting system, and his statement is this shouldn't be used. This is the state of the art, as good as a university study Harvard can do, but if you're doing something more important than who is your class president in high school, you shouldn't use it. The problem fundamentally is, and by the way, there's wonderful research by Jeremy Epstein, who used to be with Microsoft. He's now with SRI. Again, a groundbreaking work in how you use cryptography. But the problem is we have to be able to prove to everyone, non-cryptographers, how it works. If the people don't trust the system, they will stop using it. And democracy is equally dangerous that people are not caring about the voting process than it's frauded. So in the future, maybe there is a cryptographic solution which people can understand, and everyone, from 18-year-old out of the school to 85-year-old, everybody can nod their heads, yes, I know how this works, this is safe. But we don't have it right now. And the problem is the transparency. If the system is not transparent, there is always a place to hide. An election system should be somewhere, because we have such a limitations. We have the anonymity requirement, we have the transparency requirement. We cannot have places where only a small number of people know how it works. It has to be understandable by everyone. So that's why I'm fascinated, I'm following all the research in that area, but I don't think that technology is anytime soon usable in the real elections.
Hi, Harri. Thanks for the talk. Mine is a two-part question. Did you find any fraud in a real election? And if you did, what happened legally with this election?
So, first of all, the problem with the fraud is because of the system is anonymous and it's sealed, proving a fraud is very difficult. A few things has come out because of the studies. In Ohio, it was found that they were rigging the recount. So a couple of people got jailed for that. The reason which was never studied is why they were rigging the recount. What they were hiding. That was never answered. So we have a lot of these kind of incidents where a little bit questionable things is, right now I think in Pima County, Arizona, there is a lawsuit where they actually found out they have bought the same equipment I used to hack the machine, the same machine they have, and there is a guy who has gone under oath saying, I was asked to hack it. So there's a lawsuit, but there is no, if you ask the smoking gun, this was a clear fraud, that kind of thing hasn't happened. And it's the nature of the system because it has to be protecting the voters. So the problem is you don't have the check and balances the same as a bank. But a lot of this kind of anecdotal, you see the rigged recount, you see people saying, we have this machine, there's a receipt, we bought the machine. These kind of things has happened. But no smoking gun.
You mentioned that there's no much money behind election voting research, right? I mean, we shouldn't expect our own governments to heavily fund this kind of research. So in your eyes, who should be funding this kind of research?
Well, first of all, even before the new scandals, I think that buying an election software system for foreign countries is not exactly the smartest idea. Mm-hmm. So since it's your vote, since it's your country, maybe you should care about how the votes are counted. Again, people who are in the country are vested. They want one party or another. So you have a problem trusting them too. So what you really need is a development which is done locally, but heavily outside people who are watching over and making sure that the development is going right. Also, the other thing is that every country has their own flavor of democracy. So taking a system from one country and trying to make it work in another country is not exactly easy either. So I personally think that each country should design their own systems and then hire outside experts to validate, audit, see that the system works. But it has to be built because only the people who know the local environment know how to solve the problems, and on the other hand is, again, since it's your vote and your children's vote and your significant other's vote, maybe you should not let foreign countries to provide the software system how it's counted. Like Stalin said, it doesn't matter who, the votes, who they cast, it's how counts the votes.
Bueno, agradecemos mucho, Harri. Thank you, Harri.